Like a lot of people who live in the South, now I don't mean Florida South, but Southern Ontario, I've always had a foggy view of the North. When I was a punk at art school in Toronto, I thought everything north of Bloor Street was uncharted territory. But we Canadians live in a huge country. But knowing it and really knowing it are two different things. In this episode of El Camino, we head north, really north. El Camino is brought to you by Yamaha, revs your heart. Importations Thibault, distributor of power sports parts and accessories. And by GP Bikes, Canada's power sports authority. Welcome to El Camino. 80% of the Canadian population lives within 120 kilometers of the US border, clinging by the fingernails to whatever heat drifts across the border. But drive north from the border for an hour or so and you'll notice something different. Fewer houses, fewer people, a different way of life. And the people in the north are quieter, more self-dependent. Washington State and the state of Mississippi are very distinct culturally. We get that. But the same exists here in Canada, right in the same province. And that's what we're looking for on this trip. But first I need a motorcycle. What should I ride? Now, anything Italian is just too cappuccino-ish for the north. A BMW? Maybe. Sure, something Japanese, well, that would do it. But let's back up. When you drive north, you see things that you don't see in the south. Deer and moose in the back of one-ton pickup trucks, and log skidders. Log skidders. Why, that's it. The motorcycle I need for the north is a Harley-Davidson. Something long and low and heavy, but most of all, heavy duty, like a one-ton. Like the lumberjack I met once from Thunder Bay, whose hands were the size of trash can lids, and whose feet were size 13. And let me tell you, on a 5'9" man, that's something you don't soon forget. This is a challenging time for Harley-Davidson, the brand that was once one of the most powerful, influential, and valuable nameplates in all of manufacturing. Right up there with Apple, Amazon, and Google, is now caught between a rock and another rock. In the US, for generations, Harley was the bike of outlaws and in-laws and lawyers and yuppies. Whatever happened to yuppies? It was the brand that could do no wrong, but things began to change. Baby boomers, who had the disposable income to buy expensive motorcycles, began to age out of riding, and age out of living for that matter. And the next generation of Harley riders didn't come in the numbers that the boomers had provided. But like all good stories, there's an intriguing subtext to Harley-Davidson's current malaise of falling stock values and sagging sales. Harley became trapped between the two sides in the US culture wars. The political right began to see Harley as woke because of its adoption of DEI policies. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, after the election of Donald Trump, became as out of fashion as skinny jeans on baby boomers. Shudder the thought. And to the political left, Harley-Davidson represented everything that was boorish about America. Big and bossy and loud and pushy. Let's set aside politics, if that's even possible anymore, and look at my Harley-Davidson Street Glide CVO as just a motorcycle with strengths and weaknesses like any other machine, be it a bike or a car or a skid steer logging thingy. Our first stop is North Bay, the gateway to the north, it says on the signs. It's on Lake Nipissing, this is the waterfront. Very nice, at least in the summer. Lake Nipissing is very shallow. On average, it's only 15 feet deep, which is shallow considering that it's a huge lake. Every time I go to Lake Nipissing, I stay at my home away from home, the Best Western. Fabulous place. It's got great lighting, and you can get anywhere in North Bay in 15 minutes from there, which includes Twig's Coffee Roasters. This is not a commercial message. I pay just like everybody else. Now at Twig's, you're bound to meet some characters, like people who pedal three-wheeled bicycles with windshields. Because of the north winds, you know. They can lift you right off your feet. Totally makes sense. Good coffee too. But we've got to get going. My next stop as I head north is the town of Temagami. Now, a long time ago, back when the earth was flat, I got arrested in Temagami. All right, I'll tell you the story since you asked. The last standing old-growth forest in eastern North America is deep in the woods outside Temagami. And our provincial government, back in the day, decided it would log these trees, massive red and white pines. But the entire episode was a boondoggle. The government was just trying to gain northern votes. The logging was so heavily subsidized by public money that it would have been cheaper to pay the loggers their full wage to stay at home and leave the trees alone. So I joined a huge protest in the woods, hundreds of us. We had to portage canoes and sleep in the sand, and it was fabulous. And then we got arrested for blocking a road, and then they dragged us out of there, which was great because we didn't have to portage our way out. And then they set us free with the caveat that if we came back, we'd really get arrested. And that's my story. Where was I? Temagami and covered bridges. This segment is brought to you by Yamaha. Welcome back to El Camino. Who doesn't love a covered bridge? And like all covered bridges, it's a secret portal to another world. Dally too long on the way through it, and you'll end up deposited somewhere else. And it's always at random. I mean, your destination. You don't know where you're going to end up. I think I'm somewhere in the Maritimes. I can smell the ocean. But all it takes to reverse the spell is to say aloud the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in reverse, in French. I'll be here for a while. It was late the next day when I finally was beamed back to Temagami. Mercifully, the Harley was sitting next to the covered bridge, but the fuel tank was nearly empty. Someone's got a story to tell. I fired up the hog and headed north on Highway 11. And then I got a feeling deep in the bones that told me something interesting was coming my way. Of course, as a skeptic, I had no idea what this something might be. Having already been abducted twice by aliens, I had no desire to go down that road again. I kept my mind open and my senses alert. And then it happened. As I passed a road that turned off the highway, I began to twitch. But this was not my usual twitch. This was something more. I slowed the Harley, did a U-turn, and headed down a road to the town of Cobalt, a town I knew nothing about. But before I tell you about what I found in Cobalt, let's talk about the Harley-Davidson CVO Street Glide. First, well, we have to talk money, and there's no need to be awkward about it. We're all friends. At $53,000, give or take, the Street Glide is expensive. Even this Ducati Panigale V4, oh so tasty and red, is only $30,000. That leaves $23,000 for tires and track days. I know it's not the same crowd. I've ridden a good number of Harleys in my life, and 20 years ago they were decent, if not inspired motorcycles. They didn't leak oil and they started, but there were peculiarities about them, like the brakes. They were high effort, like squeezing these. And then you'd slowly. But this new Street Glide has Brembo brakes, and Brembo are the gold standard for stoppers. And they're good, much better than the old brakes, but oddly they're still high effort. But that's not Brembo's fault. That's a Harley specification choice. Why? I don't know. Sometimes I think Harley engineers haven't ridden other motorcycles from different brands. ones with brakes that stop on a dime with one finger. The other thing odd about Harley-Davidson motorcycles is their obsession with low seat heights. Now I realize that not every rider has been gifted with an inseam as epic as mine, but low seats, while great at stoplights, mean two things. The first is severely limited rear suspension travel. On a rough road, the Street Glide has a ride as supple as a toboggan on an icy grade. And the low seat height, high handlebar, and feet-out riding position loads the spine. And my spine is sensitive, unlike me, generally. But otherwise, the Harley is about as refined a machine as you can get with two giant pistons hammering between your knees. And it's got some get up and go, too, though the CVO moniker, which stands for Custom Vehicle Operations, would lead you to believe it could yank your hips out of their sockets. But it's not really a performance machine. It's a momentum machine, and I like that. It feels as if it could hammer straight through the wall of a prison to bust your lover out of the can. This is what Harley-Davidsons do well. They're theatrical motorcycles. They give the rider a sense of occasion. It's the perfect motorcycle to ride into one of the most astonishing towns in all of Canada. This segment is brought to you by Best Western Hotels and Resorts. Welcome back to El Camino. On the surface of it, Cobalt looks like any typical down on its luck town. But there's something in the air, and it doesn't take long to find out why. Cobalt, as I learned from reading Charlie Angus's excellent book, was in the early years of the last century the kind of wild mining town we tend to think of as a Western phenomenon, like Deadwood or Dodge City or Tombstone. Millions and millions of dollars of minerals came out of this very town. And an old quip went like this: "What's Toronto? Why, it's the place where you catch the train to Cobalt." The town had everything: vaudeville houses, brothels, racial tensions, fine dining, extreme wealth, extreme poverty, brutal working conditions, non-existent sanitation, disease, and squalor, and strikes that were ruthlessly crushed by heartless mine owners. Did you know that the Workmen's Compensation Board originated in Cobalt? And what's most remarkable is that although it's been over a century since the town was mined out, you can still feel the energy of the workers who lived and who died in the mines that run under these streets. I said a Harley was a theatrical motorcycle, and Cobalt is a theatrical town. In its prime, New York City newspapers did multi-page features on Cobalt, on the ups and downs of the various mines, where to invest, what to avoid. In Canada, we like to imagine ourselves as a rational, temperate, accepting people. Cobalt's history blows that to bits. The provincial government didn't give a hoot about the workers. They did everything in their power to curry favor with mine owners. If you think the residential school scandal was the beginning of our genocide against Aboriginal people, I've got to burst your bubble. Mining companies, with the full support of the government, ran roughshod over the first peoples of the land. Come to Cobalt, and you really should come to Cobalt, and you'll feel the bloodshed in the winds that blow down from the hills. But alongside the misery that existed in Cobalt, there was also a certain kind of lawless freedom. Interracial relationships, while not acceptable in the rest of the country, were tolerated in Cobalt. This is something you find in a lot of rough and tumble frontier towns. Life is so raw and to the bone that who has time for things as trivial as who's sleeping with whom? All right, now I'm hungry. And since Cobalt's luxury dining establishments have closed, I've got to hit the road to Haileybury on the shores of Lake Temiskaming. The skies, which threatened rain earlier in the day, have cleared, and it's a perfectly calm, beautiful evening. After dinner at a brew pub, I looked for a motel, but rooms were scarce due to a fishing tournament. Onward to New Liskeard and a room and a hot bath, and a mind that drifted off to sleep ruminating over all the day had given me. This segment is brought to you by GP Bikes. Welcome back to El Camino. The next morning was cool but bright. After refueling, I set sail toward Quebec. I've always loved circumnavigating bodies of water, and if I can go through another province or another country, well, so much the better. Not so long ago, an Italian friend asked me what was the difference between Quebec and neighboring provinces. The question, well, it caught me off guard. He wasn't interested in legalities like the ins and outs of Bill 101 or the current state of the separatist movement. He wanted to know what it felt like to move from one province to the next. I was reminded of what another friend had told me. When you're flying into Montreal, he said, look out the window of the airplane at all the swimming pools in a province with, at best, a 90-day summer season. His point was this: Quebecers will not be denied their pleasures. It's why expensive Italian sport bikes have always sold well in Quebec, despite the roads being legendarily wretched. They want what they want. And riding down the eastern side of Lake Temiskaming, you see houses and farms that reinforce his words. The farm equipment is new, the cars are new, the houses are pristine, and the shops are showy. It's a perfect morning, and I'm in the perfect mood for the Harley. Hustle the bike too hard and it feels harried, like you're racing a school bus. But put it in top gear and cruise along at semi-legal speeds, and it's in its element. Right up until I shot past a cop. Now, the Sûreté de Quebec have a legendary reputation as being less than tolerant toward wayward Ontarians. Now, had I been on my Ducati, I might have gotten a ticket. But out here in farm country, amid the beef farmers and the chicken farmers and the hog farmers, my hog got a free pass. I crossed back into Ontario at the town of Temiskaming at the bottom of the lake, which is the headwaters for the Ottawa River. And then it was south on 63 to 533 on the way to Mattawa. Now 63 is a good road, but 533 is even better. And this is where I found the cornering limitations of the Harley. At even just a moderate pace, the floorboards ground into the road, which is a melange of gravel, pavement, dirt, and yesterday's lunch. Now, I like this kind of road. It rewards focus and punishes those who become distracted. It was also home to some of the slowest drivers I've ever witnessed. I coasted past a minivan and other trucks with closed throttle. Maybe they were just enjoying the day, but maybe they'd lost the plot. And then suddenly I had one of my infrequent cravings for ice cream. I blamed the dust kicked up into my helmet, or maybe I just needed a distraction to take my mind off my spine, which was being attacked by the Harley's unforgiving rear suspension. At Mattawa, I had lunch at a restaurant with the most unusual feature, a washroom with a two-seater toilet. Now, I'd seen this before once in an outhouse, but never in a washroom with plumbing, in a restaurant. I tried to imagine a scenario where you could put this to use. Do you go with a friend, or is it okay to tap lightly on the door and join something in progress? Further to this, do you introduce yourself, or do you do what we men do while standing at urinals, which is to pretend that we're alone? I left the restaurant without a definitive answer. Then it was off to feed my craving. Ice cream. Twice a summer I do this. But what flavor, and who can stop at just one? And then I thought of what a fearsome sight I was, sitting there with my house-down payment expensive Harley out front while I ate ice cream in a pink room below a smiling slice of cake and a joyous ice cream cone. My tour of the North was coming to an end. It was time to fuel up for the trek back south. But the Harley was having separation anxiety. It wanted to stay in the North. It had begun to protest by shutting down and then rebooting its digital display. At first, this gave me no small degree of anxiety. The bike's too heavy to push, and roadside assistance for a motorcycle can be dodgy. Because unless you know specifically how to haul a bike, there's a decent chance it'll end up on its side. All the way home, the Harley's display conked out and then instantly came back alive. But the bike kept running, and I got away with refueling with the bike running. And I know you're not supposed to do that, but desperate times, desperate measures, you know that. The past few years, I've spent a lot of time riding in the North. It's a different experience than riding in the South. You can go a long way without seeing other people and other riders. And I really like that. After years living in a huge city, I'm down with a little alone time. I struggle, it's true, with the distance between coffee shops. The North could do a little better at providing more consistently available espresso. Some of you, no doubt, are rolling your eyes at me, and you're not wrong. But I'm way too set in my ways to change now. After just a few days in the North, the South begins to feel congested and too tame. Hell, I'm tempted to go bust up a bar just to feed my wildness. But my back's a little stiff, and I guess I'm not really an outlaw, and my lumberjacking skills are limited to splitting kindling wood at the campsite. I guess I'm another one of those Southerners that Northerners get tired of. Can't say that I blame them. Thank you for watching El Camino. Clothing was provided by Importations Tebow. El Camino has been brought to you by Best Western Hotels and Resorts. Wherever life takes you, Best Western is there. Dainese, 75 years of performance. And by Spring Toronto Motorcycle Super Show.